Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the ancient kitchens of the pharaohs, where dinner didn't just start with bread and butter. No, before the sun even dipped behind the dunes, the rulers of Egypt were already feasting on things that would make most of us quietly close the fridge and reconsider our appetite. Imagine walking through the hot corridors of a royal palace where the air smells faintly of date wine, lotus oil, and, well, something slightly rotten. You probably wouldn't survive this menu, but that's kind of the fun of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander through the echoing halls of an ancient Egyptian palace where servants shuffle barefoot on cool stone floors. The smell hits first, sweet beer mixed with the sharp tang of fermented fish. They called it fermented mullet paste, a delicacy the pharaoh's chefs used like butter. You watch as a cook scoops it from a clay jar, greenish, gooey, and absolutely treasured. The Egyptians believed fermentation was divine rot, a gift from the gods who turned decay into flavor. Outside, the Nile hums softly, its water glinting gold in the sunset. Fishermen unload baskets of catfish, crocodile tails, and dried eels. The poorer workers eat these sun-rotted fish straight from the shore, rubbed with salt, tough as leather. But in the palace, it's all about transformation. You watch them grind the fish with coriander, honey, and leeks, turning it into a paste served before dinner. The smell makes you flinch, but the chef nods proudly. Aphrodisiac, he claims, winking. Somewhere behind you, musicians start plucking on lutes, setting the rhythm for the feast. A row of servants carries trays of beer, not crisp modern beer, but thick, porridge-like brews made from leftover bread. The ancient Egyptians didn't drink water much. It was too risky. Instead, they fermented everything. Even before dinner, they'd drink what was basically edible bread. You take a sip in your imagination. It's heavy, sour, and oddly comforting. The pharaoh's guests gather on low cushions, each with a cone of perfumed wax on their heads. As the wax melts slowly, it releases a honeyed scent. Imagine that, the room glowing orange in torchlight, everyone slightly drunk on bread beer, perfume dripping down their hair, and trays of what can only be described as glorified fish jam going around. A servant offers small bowls of liver pâté made from ducks that were fattened for weeks. The Egyptians believed eating liver gave you the courage of the gods. Another tray appears, locust skeweries, crunchy, salty, and buzzing faintly even after roasting. You're not sure if that's your imagination or some ancient form of humor. Scholars still argue whether this early phase of the feast was meant to awaken the senses or simply show off wealth. Maybe both. To eat something that smelled like decay and call it sacred, that took power. You look around the table. Gold bracelets gleam, eyelids shimmer with powdered malachite, and laughter fills the room like smoke. You notice how the line between sacred and spoiled doesn't exist here. The same rotting fish paste offered to the pharaoh was also used in temple offerings to Ra. Food wasn't just eaten, it was a prayer, a way to flirt with gods through flavor. You step outside for a moment, following the scent of baking bread. Near the servants' quarters, women knead dough with their elbows, humming softly. They bake flat breads filled with figs and wild honey, but most of these will go to the priests. Before dinner, priests blessed the kitchens, chanting over pots of stew and sprinkling beer on the fire. Everything was ritual. Even tasting something early, before the blessing, could be considered stealing from the divine. Still, the workers sneak bites. You spot one cook dipping a finger into a pot of lentil stew, brown, bubbling, smoky. He smiles, licking it clean, and glances around like a thief. The same stew will soon be served to the pharaoh, but only after being strained through fine linen and perfumed with date wine. There's something hypnotic about the rhythm of this kitchen. Wooden ladles scrape, fires crackle, and someone shouts for more coriander. The entire place hums with life and death. Every meal here is a balance between the two. Fresh ingredients mixed with rot. Life preserved through decay. You can almost hear the whisper of time, thousands of years collapsing into one moment. The next time you open your fridge and smell something questionable, imagine a pharaoh somewhere smiling and calling it dinner. Because in ancient Egypt, rotting wasn't gross, it was genius. By now, the stars have appeared above the Nile. The night breeze cools the kitchens. Servants carry out the last of the pre-dinner platters, bowls of lotus seeds fried in goose fat, salted melon rind, and pickled garlic. You think about how strange it is that these flavors still exist in some form today. Pickles, fermentation, appetizers. The blueprint of a modern meal was already there, hidden under the desert sand. You feel the story slow, the hum of the Nile fading into the night. The pharaoh's laughter echoes faintly, distant and eternal. Somewhere in the dark, a crocodile splashes, maybe dreaming of the next feast.
You step out of the golden heat of Egypt and into the marble chill of ancient Rome. The air smells different here. Olive oil, smoke, and something faintly metallic, like coins and wine. You walk past rows of bustling street vendors, calling out in Latin, waving skewers of sizzling meat. It's late afternoon, and Romans are already indulging in their favorite ritual, the gustatio, the pre-dinner snack hour. This isn't your casual handful of chips before dinner. Oh no, the Romans didn't just eat, they performed food. You wander down a cobblestone alley where a cook flips tiny birds, thrushes, over open flame, sprinkling them with honey and black pepper. The smell is both delicious and disturbing. The man smiles at you, handing one over wrapped in a fig leaf. "Try it," he says. "It tastes like music." You take a pretend bite. It's sweet, smoky, and hauntingly real. In the grand villas, though, it's even stranger. Wealthy Romans loved to shock their guests with snacks designed to provoke awe or disgust. On a marble platter, you see dormice, fattened on nuts and honey, stuffed with minced pork and pine nuts. They're arranged in a circle, each one looking eerily content, as if still napping. You can't tell if you're impressed or slightly ill. A servant pours mulsum, a mix of wine and honey that was both drink and appetizer. It's thick, golden, and glows in the lamplight. Romans didn't sip quietly. They toasted loudly, laughing about business, gods, and gossip. And yes, some even flavored their wine with crushed oyster shells or powdered pearls, believing it kept them youthful. The poet Horace once wrote that the measure of a man's sophistication was not in how much he ate, but what he dared to eat before dinner. So here you are, surrounded by dishes that test bravery more than hunger. Jellyfish in vinegar, sea urchins baked in their shells, fried flamingo tongues. Scholars still argue whether flamingo was genuinely delicious or just a power move. Maybe it didn't matter. The point was that if you could afford to waste a flamingo, you had arrived. You wander into a triclinium, a Roman dining room where guests recline on couches, eating with one hand while the other lazily gestures mid-conversation. The soft sound of fountains drifts in from the courtyard. Someone is reciting Virgil, but you can barely hear it over the crunch of roasted chickpeas and salted locusts being passed around like peanuts. At one end of the room, a host proudly displays his garum jar, a prized fermented fish sauce made by rotting anchovies in the sun for weeks. The smell is catastrophic, but everyone pretends to love it. A servant drizzles it over everything: figs, cheese, even melon. You catch yourself wrinkling your nose, but remember, the Egyptians started this trend. Decay as flavor. The Romans perfected it. You imagine one of the guests, a merchant from Alexandria, whispering that this particular batch of garum was imported from Spain and cost more than a slave. You glance at the glowing amphora, realizing you're witnessing the birth of luxury branding. Even back then, food had status. It told stories. It said, "I'm rich enough to find pleasure in the revolting." For the poorer citizens outside these marble walls, the snacks looked different but carried the same idea: resourcefulness turned into ritual. Street vendors sold panis dipper, a rough bread dipped into olive oil and crushed garlic. Sometimes the oil was stretched with wine, sometimes with vinegar or fish brine. The smell of charred bread and garlic fills the night air as you walk past the market stalls. People laugh, argue, and eat standing up, balancing clay cups of cheap wine. A small boy offers you a fig for 1 coin. It's soft, oozing syrup, and for a moment, the empire feels simple. You realize these snacks, rich or poor, served one purpose: to prepare the body for pleasure. Romans believed the stomach was like a stage curtain. It had to be teased open before the show could begin. Someone at the villa raises a cup and begins to sing a drinking song. The melody echoes down the hallways, bouncing off frescoes of gods feasting among clouds. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the rhythm. It's easy to imagine dozing off here, surrounded by laughter, food, and the slow drip of wine into marble bowls. But one thing stands out. The Romans weren't just eating to fill their stomachs, they were consuming to conquer. Every exotic ingredient, every animal roasted alive, every imported spice, they all whispered empire. Eating the world was Rome's favorite metaphor. You can almost hear a senator bragging, "We eat oysters from Gaul, dates from Arabia, and pepper from India. The world is our pantry." And in that boast, you sense something familiar: our modern obsession with global food culture. Different time, same hunger. As the torches burned lower, you notice that the lavish dishes start to vanish, replaced with softer ones: cheese with herbs, sweet figs, boiled eggs. The pre-dinner phase ends slowly, like a sunset. The room quiets, someone hiccups. A servant clears the table, whispering that the real feast begins soon. You take one last look around: the couches, the golden bowls, the stains of wine on marble, and realize this: in every age, before every dinner, there's always been a moment where humans pause between hunger and indulgence, tasting the world one strange bite at a time. The Romans just happened to make that moment eternal. You drift now across the sea, over sun-bleached islands and olive groves shimmering under the Aegean sun. The air tastes of salt and thyme. You land in Athens at dusk, where the city hums with talk, laughter, and the clink of amphorae being unsealed. This is where the Greeks transformed eating into philosophy, where the space between hunger and thought blurred into ritual. You find yourself in the courtyard of a wealthy Athenian's home. The floor is a mosaic of dolphins and vines. Oil lamps flicker against marble walls. The evening begins not with meat or bread, but with the meze, a small spread of things meant to awaken the tongue and, more importantly, the mind. You sit cross-legged beside a bowl of olives glistening with honey and fennel seed. Yes, honey. The Greeks believed sweet and briny together stirred curiosity, the same way argument stirred friendship. You pop one in your mouth and almost cough. It's both delicious and confusing. A servant pours watered wine, 2 parts water to 1 part red, fragrant with resin. No one drinks it pure. Only barbarians do that, they whisper. Around you, men in linen tunics lean forward, already debating the meaning of moderation while nibbling on goat cheese dusted with mint. It's dinner as dialogue. From a nearby kitchen, smoke curls upward. You catch the scent of grilled octopus, brushed with vinegar and fig syrup. The cook tastes it, frowns, adds a splash of olive oil pressed from the sacred trees of Athena herself. Food here isn't only sustenance, it's a gift from the gods, and every taste carries gratitude. When you eat, you honor the divine. When you waste, you insult it. Across the table, an older philosopher, perhaps a student of Plato, holds up a small bowl of lentils and says something that makes the others laugh. Even Socrates, he says, preferred lentil soup to gold. You can't tell if he's joking or serious, maybe both, because here, simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. You notice that before the larger feast begins, someone sets a small plate aside for the household spirits. A few olives, a drizzle of oil, a crust of bread. The Greeks believed these spirits protected the home, and to forget them meant inviting misfortune. You watch the host whisper a quick blessing. Scholars still argue whether this was religion or superstition, but to you it feels tender, like leaving the porch light on for an old friend. The night grows cooler. Crickets begin their chorus beyond the courtyard wall. The meze evolves. Tiny bowls appear, figs stuffed with nuts, pickled onions, salted anchovies, roasted barley cakes. Everything comes in moderation, but there's always more. You taste a bit of everything, the flavors weaving together like conversation threads. Someone begins to play the lyre. The sound is light, teasing. The host smiles, quoting lines from Homer about heroes returning home to warm meals. You realize how much the Greeks linked food and virtue. To eat too fast was vulgar. To taste too much was greedy. But to savor, to appreciate, to discuss, this was culture. You tilt your head toward the stars, constellations the Greeks once used as recipes for stories. There's Orion, the hunter, whose belt points toward the season of olives. There's Taurus, marking when goats produce the best milk for cheese. Even the sky seemed to tell them when to dine. In the corner, a group of women prepares small honey cakes called melituta. They mix flour, honey, and sesame, then fry them in oil until crisp. The smell drifts through the courtyard like a soft spell. One woman explains that these were offered to Artemis before hunts and to brides before weddings, a bite before fate, a blessing before change. You realize how every meal here begins with something given away. Before eating, they feed the gods. Before pleasure, they practice gratitude. The wine flows more freely now. Conversations loosen. You catch fragments, debates about justice, jokes about Sparta, gossip about a playwright who supposedly fainted from bad cheese. Someone pours you more wine and says, "Eat slowly, the gods are watching." You can't tell if it's a warning or a compliment. Maybe both, again. The evening fades into deeper blue. Torches hiss as they burn lower. You dip a piece of barley bread into olive oil infused with garlic and lemon. The taste is sharp, clean, eternal. It feels like biting into sunlight preserved in liquid form. The Greeks called it liquid gold, and they weren't exaggerating. They used it for cooking, cleansing, and even healing wounds. To run out of oil was almost a moral failure, like losing wisdom itself. Scholars still debate whether Greek diets were truly as healthy as legends suggest, but you can feel the logic in every bite. Balance, harmony, proportion. To them, the perfect meal mirrored the perfect soul. As the night deepens, laughter softens. You lean back on the cool marble bench, lulled by the slow rhythm of the sea beyond the city. A soft breeze passes through the olive trees, carrying the faint scent of salt and sweetness. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher yawns mid-sentence, deciding that maybe the meaning of life can wait until morning. You realize the secret they all shared, that food wasn't just what filled the stomach, it was what held the world together. Olives and honey, salt and wisdom, the taste of the gods disguised as dinner.
You drift now across the sea, over sun-bleached islands and olive groves shimmering under the Aegean sun. The air tastes of salt and thyme. You land in Athens at dusk, where the city hums with talk, laughter, and the clink of amphorae being unsealed. This is where the Greeks transformed eating into philosophy, where the space between hunger and thought blurred into ritual. You find yourself in the courtyard of a wealthy Athenian's home. The floor is a mosaic of dolphins and vines. Oil lamps flicker against marble walls. The evening begins not with meat or bread, but with the meze, a small spread of things meant to awaken the tongue, and more importantly, the mind. You sit cross-legged beside a bowl of olives glistening with honey and fennel seed. Yes, honey. The Greeks believed sweet and briny together stirred curiosity, the same way argument stirred friendship. You pop one in your mouth and almost cough. It's both delicious and confusing. A servant pours watered wine, 2 parts water to 1 part red, fragrant with resin. No one drinks it pure, only barbarians do that, they whisper. Around you, men in linen tunics lean forward, already debating the meaning of moderation while nibbling on goat cheese dusted with mint. It's dinner as dialogue. From a nearby kitchen, smoke curls upward. You catch the scent of grilled octopus brushed with vinegar and fig syrup. The cook tastes it, frowns, adds a splash of olive oil pressed from the sacred trees of Athena herself. Food here isn't only sustenance, it's a gift from the gods, and every taste carries gratitude. When you eat, you honor the divine. When you waste, you insult it. Across the table, an older philosopher, perhaps a student of Plato, holds up a small bowl of lentils and says something that makes the others laugh. Even Socrates, he said, preferred lentil soup to gold. You can't tell if he's joking or serious. Maybe both. Because here, simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. You notice that before the larger feast begins, someone sets a small plate aside for the household spirits. A few olives, a drizzle of oil, a crust of bread. The Greeks believed these spirits protected the home, and to forget them meant inviting misfortune. You watch the host whisper a quick blessing. Scholars still argue whether this was religion or superstition, but to you it feels tender, like leaving the porch light on for an old friend. The night grows cooler. Crickets begin their chorus beyond the courtyard wall. The meze evolves. Tiny bowls appear. Figs stuffed with nuts, pickled onions, salted anchovies, roasted barley cakes. Everything comes in moderation, but there's always more. You taste a bit of everything, the flavors weaving together like conversation threads. Someone begins to play the lyre. The sound is light, teasing. The host smiles, quoting lines from Homer about heroes returning home to warm meals. You realize how much the Greeks linked food and virtue. To eat too fast was vulgar. To taste too much was greedy. But to savor, to appreciate, and to discuss, this was culture. You tilt your head toward the stars, constellations the Greeks once used as recipes for stories. There's Orion the hunter, whose belt points toward the season of olives. There's Taurus,
marking when goats produce the best milk for cheese. Even the sty seemed to tell them when to dine. In the corner, a group of women prepares small honey cakes called milituta. They mix flour, honey, and sesame, then fry them in oil until crisp. The smell drifts through the courtyard like a soft spell. One woman explains that these were offered to Artemis before hunts and to brides before weddings, a bite before fate, a blessing before change. You realize how every meal here begins with something given away. Before eating, they feed the gods. Before pleasure, they practice gratitude. The wine flows more freely now. Conversations loosen. You catch fragments, debates about justice, jokes about Sparta, gossip about a playwright who supposedly fainted from bad cheese. Someone pours you more wine and says, "Eat slowly, the gods are watching." You can't tell if it's a warning or a compliment. Maybe both again. The evening fades into deeper blue. Torches hiss as they burn lower. You dip a piece of barley bread into olive oil infused with garlic and lemon. The taste is sharp, clean, eternal. It feels like biting into sunlight preserved in liquid form. The Greeks called it liquid gold, and they weren't exaggerating. They used it for cooking, cleansing, and even healing wounds. To run out of oil was almost a moral failure, like losing wisdom itself. Scholars still debate whether Greek diets were truly as healthy as legends suggest, but you can feel the logic in every bite: balance, harmony, proportion. To them, the perfect meal mirrored the perfect soul. As the night deepens, laughter softens. You lean back on the cool marble bench, lulled by the slow rhythm of the sea beyond the city. A soft breeze passes through the olive trees, carrying the faint scent of salt and sweetness. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher yawns mid-sentence, deciding that maybe the meaning of life can wait until morning. You realize the secret they all shared, that food wasn't just what filled the stomach, it was what held the world together. Olives and honey, salt and wisdom, the taste of the gods, disguised as dinner.
Cold wind stings your face before you even open your eyes. The stars here are sharper, closer, hung over the jagged edges of fjords and dark forests. You hear waves crash against long ships drawn up on the shore, and somewhere nearby, men are laughing. A deep, chesty laughter that sounds like thunder wrapped in fur. You're in Scandinavia, sometime around the 9th century, and dinner isn't what you think it is. Here, the line between meal and survival blurs. You walk toward the firelight spilling from a longhouse. Smoke curls through the roof beams, thick with the smell of fat and salt. Inside, warriors sit shoulder to shoulder, scraping knives across wooden plates. There's no music, no gold, no marble, just noise and heat. A woman ladles broth from a cauldron, her face glowing red from the flames. The broth is pale, oily, and smells faintly of the sea. You sit down beside her and ask, half jokingly, "What's for dinner?" She snorts and hands you a wooden bowl. Inside, a piece of fermented shark, known as hakarl. It's soft, gray, and reeks like ammonia and salt mixed with old cheese. "Eat," she says, "if you're brave." You bring it close to your nose and immediately regret it. It's horrifying, which means it's perfect. Because this isn't just food, it's proof of endurance. Vikings ate what the earth gave them, even if the earth smelled like death. Fermentation wasn't a choice, it was preservation. Fish buried underground for months became edible when nothing else was. The taste, once you manage a bite, is sharp, acidic, almost electric.
The woman laughs at your expression. "Good," she says. "Now you'll live through winter." Around the fire, warriors chew dried fish and seal fat, washing it down with hornfuls of mead, honey wine, thick enough to coat your throat. One man bites into a strip of smoked reindeer, his beard shining with grease. Another passes around a jar of pickled herring, catching your grimace. "You think it smells bad now," he says. "Wait until you dream about it." Everyone roars with laughter. Scholars still argue whether Viking food was truly miserable or just misunderstood. Many modern cooks who've tried to recreate it claim it's surprisingly balanced, rich in fat and protein, perfect for the climate. But the Vikings themselves saw eating as something spiritual. Before every raid, they shared a pre-battle meal, offering bits of meat to Odin, tossing bones into the fire as tribute. Food was a pact. Eat together, fight together, die together if needed. You watch as a group of men begins to chant softly, low voices blending with the sound of the sea outside. They're blessing the meal, the Seder ritual. A bowl of warm goat's milk is passed around. Everyone drinks a mouthful, murmuring thanks for strength, warmth, and glory. Then, as casually as breathing, someone tears open a roasted bird with their bare hands. The smell of burning pine fills the hall. A young woman crushes juniper berries and mixes them into porridge made of barley and blood. Yes, real blood, stirring it until it darkens to a deep red. She ladles it into bowls for the warriors. You take one cautiously. It's warm, metallic, oddly satisfying. You're tasting life and death in the same spoonful. Outside, the wind howls against the wooden walls. The long ships creak. Inside, the laughter grows louder, wilder. Someone slams a cup on the table and shouts about tomorrow's raid. The energy shifts. The meal has become a ritual of courage. No one's afraid of dying. They're afraid of being forgotten. And tonight's food, as disgusting as it may seem, is part of memory-making. In the corner, an elder tells a story of how Odin himself once feasted on goat stew and mead before battle. The men pound the tables in approval. You notice that even the children are allowed to sip a little mead. It's not about intoxication, but participation. To eat what the clan eats is to belong. You glance at the food again, the shark, the seal fat, the blood porridge, and realize it's a kind of philosophy. The Egyptians worshipped decay, the Romans flaunted luxury, but the Vikings, they honored endurance. Everything they ate had survived something: frost, rot, hunger, time. It was like eating proof that life, no matter how harsh, always fights back. The night stretches on. Outside, snow begins to fall, catching firelight as it drifts through the cracks in the roof. A bard begins to sing low and steady about the sea that never sleeps. The men listen, eyes distant, hands still greasy from dinner. You can feel the tension beneath their laughter, the quiet knowledge that tomorrow, some of them won't return. A young man passes you a piece of smoked whale blubber. It's rubbery, salty, almost candle-like in texture. "Eat," he says, softly, "for luck." You chew, trying not to think about it, but somewhere inside, you understand. In a land where nothing grows for half the year, every bite is sacred. Scholars still argue whether these pre-raid meals had magical intent or simply practical fuel, but you can feel the answer. It's both. Food, like the sword or the ship, was an act of faith. The fire burns lower. The longhouse grows quiet except for the crackle of pine logs. You can hear the sea outside, whispering like a god in the dark. You sit there, stomach full of impossible flavors, heart heavy with awe. The Vikings didn't fear death because they ate it every night, bite by bite, and called it supper.
You look toward the door. Beyond it, the world waits, frozen and endless. Someone raises their horn and shouts, "Tomorrow we feast again in Valhalla." Laughter follows, then silence. The night closes in like a cloak. And for a brief, flickering moment, you understand them. You taste their courage, salted and sour, and it lingers long after the fire dies.
The first sound you hear is silk. Soft, endless, whispering silk. The second is the quiet drip of water from a carved jade fountain. You're not in a smoky longhouse anymore. You're standing in the Forbidden City, centuries ago, where the air smells faintly of sandalwood and roasted sesame. Everything here gleams, the floors, the walls, even the food. This isn't a feast for survival. This is a performance for the gods themselves. It's early evening, and the palace kitchens are alive. Hundreds of cooks move like clockwork in perfect silence, each performing a single task: chopping lotus roots into exact petals, brushing duck skin with honey, boiling shark fins until translucent. A gong sounds, deep and slow. That's the signal. Dinner is about to begin. But before the emperor dines, he tastes. And tasting here means a parade of starters forbidden to commoners, not for safety, but for power. Because in ancient China, food was hierarchy on a plate. To eat what the emperor ate was treason. To cook it without permission was death. A servant ushers you to the side of the golden dining hall. You see him, the Son of Heaven, seated alone at a long lacquered table. Around him, 12 dishes glimmer beneath bronze lids. Steam curls up, carrying scents of sweetness and fear. He lifts one lid, and your stomach turns. Inside is a bowl of swallow's nest soup, made from the hardened saliva of cave swifts. It took climbers days to scrape these nests from cliffs along the South China Sea. The texture? Gelatinous, slippery, like a ghost in your mouth. But to the emperor, it's divine medicine, said to strengthen lungs, prolong youth, and even sharpen the mind for statecraft. He drinks it slowly, eyes half closed, savoring the idea of immortality more than the taste itself. Next, attendants bring bear's paw, a dish so sacred it was banned for everyone except royalty. It's boiled for hours until it turns tender, then glazed in soy, rice wine, and ginseng. You can smell the fat before it even reaches the table. To ancient nobles, this was not food, but virtue embodied, a symbol of strength, courage, and heaven's favor. But it wasn't all power and excess. Some dishes carried shadows. In the corner, a eunuch lays out a platter of moon-shaped dumplings filled with minced pheasant and ground pearls. Pearls, actual crushed pearls, were believed to cleanse the body of evil spirits and grant glowing skin. The emperor eats them between sips of chrysanthemum tea, as if swallowing beauty itself. You ask one of the attendants what happens to leftovers. The man gives a nervous smile. "Leftovers?" he whispers. "There are none. What he does not finish must be destroyed." You realize then that this feast isn't about nourishment at all. It's about control. The emperor doesn't just own the food, he owns the right to pleasure itself. At the far end of the table, a silver plate gleams. On it sits something simple, a single boiled egg dyed gold with saffron. You wouldn't think twice about it. But the attendant explains, it's laid only by hens fed on special herbs kept within palace gardens. The emperor eats one every morning to absorb the sun's blessing. It's a ritual of divine continuity, not breakfast. Suddenly, a hush falls over the room. 2 guards enter, carrying a covered bronze pot. The head chef himself follows, kneeling as he sets it down. The emperor gestures. The lid lifts, and a cloud of steam escapes. Sharp, metallic, almost herbal. Inside is snake soup, thickened with turtle blood and black mushrooms.
According to court physicians, it balanced yin and yang, kept bones strong, and warded off evil. According to you, it smells like a thunderstorm mixed with fear. You look around and notice that no one else is eating. Every eye in the room is fixed on the emperor's face, waiting for approval. One wrong twitch, one flicker of discontent, and someone could disappear by dawn. The emperor tastes the soup, swallows, nods once. The entire room exhales. Somewhere, a flute begins to play again. In another bowl sits shark fin stew, shimmering like silk. Modern ethics have rightly condemned this delicacy, but in ancient China, it was a mark of status, rare, dangerous, and staggeringly expensive. It symbolized both wealth and mercy, the ability to command nature, yet appreciate it delicately. The contradiction was the point. And then the strangest course arrives, drunken shrimp, still wriggling in rice wine. They're alive when served, numbed by alcohol, and eaten instantly. You turn away, but the emperor eats one calmly. In his world, mastery means control over life itself. At last, the final dish is brought in, glowing faintly in the lamplight. Phoenix claws, chicken feet, cooked in lotus oil, said to represent rebirth and the eternal cycle of power. The emperor picks one up, inspects it, then smiles. The court laughs with him, perfectly timed, perfectly terrified. You begin to understand. For ancient Chinese rulers, eating wasn't an act of hunger. It was theater. Every dish a metaphor, every bite a prayer. Food wasn't meant to satisfy the stomach, but to remind everyone who sat at the top of the world. When the meal ends, incense fills the air. Servants clear the plates in absolute silence. The emperor rises, slow and deliberate, his robe shimmering with embroidered dragons. He hasn't eaten much. He didn't need to. He just needed to be seen eating. Outside, the palace lights flicker against the darkening sky. Beyond the red walls, millions of commoners are eating rice gruel, garlic, and maybe a scrap of pork if they're lucky. And yet somehow, their food tastes more human. As you walk out past the courtyard, you glance back one last time. The Forbidden City glows like a golden cage. Inside it, the richest man alive just dined on myth and medicine, surrounded by silence. And suddenly, you realize the most dangerous thing in the palace wasn't poison. It was perfection.
The first scent that greets you is smoke, sweet, buttery, and sacred. It's dusk in the Vedic plains of ancient India, and the world smells like ghee and firewood, like something between hunger and holiness. You stand barefoot in a circle of stone altars, their edges glowing red as priests chant verses that hum in your bones. The air trembles with rhythm. You are not in a dining hall tonight. You are in a ritual kitchen where the gods eat first, and humans wait for permission to taste life. A priest, bare-chested and solemn, stirs a bronze pot filled with simmering milk and wild grains. It's paesa, an early ancestor of rice pudding. You can see him sprinkle in cardamom, turmeric, and long pepper, ingredients that smell both soothing and sharp. He doesn't cook for pleasure. He cooks to summon the divine. When he lifts the ladle and pours the mixture onto the fire, the flames leap high, devouring the offering. It sizzles, pops, and vanishes into smoke. The gods, it's believed, consume through fragrance. Humans will eat what remains after divinity is done. You watch quietly as others lay out flatbreads of barley and millet, smeared with clarified butter. A boy beside you whispers, "We feed Agni first. Then he carries our food to heaven." You nod, though your stomach growls softly. Hunger feels different when the gods are your dinner guests. As twilight deepens, the chanting changes. The priests begin preparing the soma, a mysterious drink pressed from mountain herbs. Its recipe is lost to time, but tonight you see pale stalks being crushed between stones, the juice glowing faintly in the firelight. Some say soma gave immortality, some say it gave visions. Either way, It's intoxicating. You watch as the priests sip the liquid with reverence, eyes closing, voices rising. For a moment, the whole world feels suspended between breath and silence. Nearby, women grind spices on stone slabs, black cumin, ginger, asafoetida, turning them into pastes that fill the air with pungent perfume. These aren't kitchen aromas. They're mantras made visible. You can almost taste the warmth on your tongue. When the priest calls, they pour the mixture into bowls, blending it with honey and fruit pulp. The smell alone could make you forget your name. Then, from the shadows, a bell rings. The offering meal has begun. You're handed a small leaf plate. Nothing royal, just woven banana leaf folded into a bowl. Inside is a spoonful of roasted chickpeas, a bit of wild spinach, and a drizzle of golden ghee. No salt, no sugar, just balance. You take a bite. It's earthy, humble, and somehow perfect. The food doesn't excite, it grounds. "Remember," says an old man beside you, his beard long and ash-white, "food is prasad, a blessing, not a meal." He gestures toward the altar where the last of the ghee flames flicker out. The gods taste the spirit. You taste the echo. The line between devotion and dinner blurs. Children giggle softly as they lick sweetened rice from their fingers. The elders murmur prayers of gratitude. A cow wanders lazily nearby, her bell chiming in time with the fire's crackle. It feels timeless, this act of eating with reverence. As night thickens, you wander toward the village edge, where farmers rest beside their tools. A woman squats near a small fire, stirring lentils with tamarind and fenugreek, the scent tangy and warm. She offers you a clay bowl. We wait until the gods are fed, then we eat. You take a sip. The lentils are soft, smoky, and alive with spice. You can taste the rhythm of centuries in it. In the distance, temple drums begin to play. You realize this isn't just dinner, it's cosmic choreography. The earth gives grain, fire transforms it, gods bless it, and humans share what's left. Every meal is an act of gratitude, not greed. You glance up at the sky, streaked with orange and violet. The first stars flicker like distant lamps. Somewhere a conch shell blows, a signal that the evening ritual is complete. Around you, families settle into quiet laughter. The priests extinguish the fires one by one, murmuring mantras that dissolve into the night air. The scent of burning sandalwood lingers like a memory. You think of how different this is from the feasts of kings and emperors. There's no gold, no spectacle, only simplicity, reverence, and spice. Yet somehow it feels richer. Here, food isn't power, it's connection. Between soil and soul, between hunger and humility. As you sit back and watch the last embers die, a final offering is placed on the altar. A handful of sesame seeds and a drop of ghee. For the ancestors, they too must eat. You realize then that in ancient India, dinner was never just about sustenance. It was a conversation between the living and the divine, carried out in the language of smoke, spice, and silence. The wind shifts and carries the smell of roasted cumin and something sweet, jaggery melting in warm milk. You close your eyes and breathe it in. The night feels endless, but comforting. Somewhere in the dark, a bell rings again, soft and low. You don't need to eat more. You already feel full, of warmth, of wonder, of something eternal.
The first thing you notice is the color, a deep burning red that stains everything. The clay, the sky, even the air seems painted in it. You're standing in Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec world, just before sunset. Smoke rises from temple fires, mingling with the smell of roasted maize and cacao. Drums echo in the distance, slow and heavy, like a heartbeat buried beneath stone. Tonight, dinner is not just a meal, it's a ritual of devotion, and a test of courage. You awaken to the clatter of wooden bowls and the smell of damp earth. The grand temples and golden feasts are gone, replaced by low huts, thatched roofs, and muddy pathways. It's Europe in the Middle Ages, long before silverware, long before comfort. The sun is sinking behind gray clouds, and the chill of evening wraps around you like an old, unwashed blanket. You can almost hear the stomachs growling. Dinner time, if you can call it that. For peasants, it wasn't a meal to savor, it was fuel for survival. You follow a line of weary villagers back from the fields, their hands rough from plows and frost. A woman hums softly as she carries a dented pot of stew. The scent is simple: onions, cabbage, maybe a trace of barley. But underneath it all is the faint bitterness of burnt bread and stale ale. That's dinner tonight. That's dinner every night. You duck into a cottage where smoke curls up through a hole in the roof. Inside, it's dim but warm. The family sits on benches carved from tree trunks, a single tallow candle flickering in the middle. The mother ladles thick brown soup into wooden bowls. You take one, the surface shimmering faintly with fat. It's called pottage, the medieval answer to everything. It's a bubbling mix of whatever the day allowed: turnips, leeks, and yesterday's scraps, boiled together until it all tastes vaguely edible. You lift the spoon. It's salty, smoky, and chewy. You glance down. A small beetle floats lazily on the surface. No one seems to notice. Or maybe they just don't care. Protein is protein, after all. Eat while it's warm, says the old man beside you, toothless but smiling. Gold pottage is for sinners. You're not sure he's joking. Beside the fire, a girl slices a loaf of black rye bread, so dense it could stop an arrow. She smears it with lard, her fingers leaving greasy prints. No butter tonight. That's for lords and abbots. She hands you a slice, and you bite in. It's sour and hard, but it fills your mouth with warmth. Hunger makes philosophers of everyone, and you suddenly understand why prayers before meals became tradition. The conversation drifts from weather to gossip to something about wolves in the nearby forest. Someone passes a small jug your way. You take a cautious sip. Ale, thick and cloudy, weaker than modern beer, but safer than water. The villagers drink it like it's medicine, which in a way it is. You cough slightly, and the room laughs. First time? Don't worry, you'll get used to it. A boy pokes the fire, roasting onions on a stick. He hands you one, skin charred, inside steaming. You blow on it, take a bite, and your eyes water instantly. Sweet, smoky, almost too intense. The boy grins, soot on his face. Better than meat, he says. Never had meat. You realize that for most people here, meat is a holiday myth, a rumor wrapped in parchment. Outside, a bell tolls from the monastery on the hill. The family falls silent for a moment, muttering a short grace. Then, as if on cue, the laughter returns. Even in scarcity, joy sneaks in like firelight through cracks. Later, someone brings out a small wooden bowl of cheese, crumbly, sharp, made from goat's milk and stored since spring. They shave pieces onto bread, the smell sharp enough to make your eyes sting. Old cheese keeps you alive, the father says. Fresh cheese makes you soft. You smile. You're not sure that's true, but tonight you won't argue. The woman ladles more stew into your bowl, adding a few stray grains of barley. That'll stick to your ribs, she says proudly. You nod. It might. It might also break your spoon. You glance at the fire and notice a pot set apart from the others. Inside, something bubbles darkly. That one's for the Lord's men, the old man explains. They like their meat. He spits softly into the ashes. We like our peace. Outside, a cold wind seeps through the cracks in the wall. The mother stuffs hay into the gaps, humming again. The smell of the pottage grows thicker, heavier.
until it's hard to tell where hunger ends and exhaustion begins. You ask if they ever eat dessert. The children giggle. The mother shrugs and pulls out a small jar of honey, thick and crystallized. She dips a wooden spoon and lets each child lick a little. "Sweet enough to make you dream," she says. You get a drop too. It's floral, ancient, beautiful. For a moment, the whole room feels lighter. Then, almost as quickly, it's gone. The bowls are scraped clean, the breadcrumbs swept into the fire. A baby starts crying. The candle sputters. Someone yawns. Life, simple and repetitive, folds back into silence. You step outside. The night smells of wood smoke and rain. Across the village, you can see thin lines of smoke rising from other huts, other families, other fires, other bowls of the same thick, humble stew. Somewhere in that sameness is survival. You look up at the stars, the same ones that watched emperors dine on gold and glass, and realize something strange. The peasants might be hungrier, poorer, rougher, but their meals have heart. Every bite, however crude, is shared. Every grain hard-earned. There's no vanity here, no performance, just warmth and the small miracle of getting through another day. As you walk back toward the dark path beyond the village, your breath fogging in the cold, you think of all the worlds you've seen tonight. Pharaohs, emperors, warriors, and peasants, and somehow this feels the most human.
You wander into a golden hall so bright it almost hurts your eyes. The torches lining the walls flicker across polished silver platters, marble pillars, and embroidered banners heavy with the scent of cinnamon and roasted meat. You're standing inside the court of a medieval king or maybe an emperor. And tonight's menu isn't just dinner. It's a show of power, wealth, and the kind of hunger that comes with ruling millions. Before dinner even begins, you notice something strange. The appetizers aren't for taste, but for display. Peacocks roasted whole with feathers reattached, pies filled with songbirds that would fly out when cut open, golden apples coated in honey and saffron. Every bite says, "I'm richer than you'll ever be." But there's something else on the menu, something forbidden. Royal food wasn't just about flavor, it was about mystery. Some fruits and meats were considered sacred, meant only for kings, queens, or priests. Eating them as a commoner could mean punishment or worse. In ancient Persia, for example, the royal melon, this rare, fragrant variety, was so prized that tasting it without permission could get you executed. You imagine a servant trembling at the table's edge, slicing the fruit in silence as the king chews slowly, savoring the secret sweetness. You walk past another table where dishes shimmer with gold leaf. Literally gold, because people back then believed eating gold could preserve youth or cure disease. It didn't, of course, but imagine the confidence it took to eat money. You glance down and see goblets of mead infused with crushed pearls and powdered coral. Scholars still argue whether these were real recipes or just exaggerated tales whispered by jealous peasants, but the records from royal kitchens don't lie. Alchemic dishes were common in medieval courts, from France to China. In France, you'd find a pre-dinner delicacy called pâte de cygne, swan pie. The neck, wings, and head were reattached after cooking, making it look as though the majestic bird might rise and take flight again. Across the channel, English royalty preferred something stranger still, cockatrice, a hybrid dish made by sewing half a pig to half a chicken roasted as one creature. It sounds absurd now, but in a world where food mirrored status, the message was clear. The king could command nature itself. But power comes with paranoia. Many kings feared poisoning, a very real threat in those glittering dining halls. So before they ate, a food taster would take the first bite, waiting under the king's gaze to see if he lived or died. You watch as one such taster dips his spoon into a rich broth laced with exotic herbs. His hands shake. The crowd waits. He swallows, hesitates,
then exhales in relief. The king nods and finally begins his meal. For the taster, survival is dinner enough. In ancient China, imperial banquets followed a code so strict that even the appetizers reflected hierarchy. The emperor's dishes arrived on golden trays, flavored with ingredients like bear paw, leopard meat, or shark fin, things forbidden to commoners. These weren't random delicacies, they carried spiritual meaning. Bear paw, for example, symbolized strength and long life. You think about that symbolism, how kings across the world used food not just to feed themselves, but to craft myths around their own bodies. Meanwhile, in Mughal India, the royal kitchen, the bawarchi khana, was a labyrinth of smoke and spices. Cooks prepared dishes with rose water, sandalwood, and gold dust. There's even a record of Emperor Shah Jahan, the man who built the Taj Mahal, eating silver-coated sweets, believed to cool the blood and cleanse the soul. Imagine that, polishing your digestive system with precious metal before the main course. But what about the forbidden fruits? Those weren't always literal. Sometimes they were dishes linked to taboo or temptation. Take the pomegranate, for instance. In Persian and Greek myth, it symbolized life and death, love and sin. And in royal courts, it appeared as a pre-meal treat during rituals of fertility or victory. A dangerous fruit in more ways than one. You picture a queen cracking one open, red juice running like blood down her fingers, the servants whispering about omens. And then there's the ultimate forbidden food, the banquet of the dead. In certain medieval traditions, kings held feasts to honor ancestors, where small portions of food were set aside for spirits before anyone could eat. If you were a servant and touched those offerings, even by accident, superstition said you'd invite a curse. One chronicler described a banquet in which a young server took a sip of the wine meant for the dead and vanished from court the next day. Coincidence maybe, but the story was enough to keep everyone cautious. You notice a pattern now. The closer food gets to power, the more dangerous it becomes. Royal appetizers were rarely about satisfying hunger. They were about reminding everyone else who deserved to eat first. You glance again at the shimmering dishes, the laughter echoing down the hall, the nervous servants standing perfectly still. Beneath the surface beauty lies anxiety, ritual, and the ever-present scent of fear. Fear of poison, of disrespect, of falling out of favor. And yet, among all the gold and luxury, the same human impulse remains. That little pause before dinner, that moment of reverence before the first bite. Whether it's a king waiting for his taster or a peasant saying a silent prayer, food, especially before dinner, carries meaning. You're watching not just a meal, but a performance that's lasted thousands of years. As you turn to leave the banquet hall, the music swells, the candles flicker, and for a second, you feel like part of the feast, caught between temptation and reverence, just before the main course begins.
You find yourself standing in the middle of an endless golden desert. The horizon trembles with heat, and the air smells faintly of salt and smoke. The sun is slipping away behind the dunes, leaving streaks of orange and violet in the sky. Somewhere ahead, a small flicker of light, a campfire, crackles against the wind. You follow it, the sand soft under your feet, until the shadows of men and camels come into view. You've arrived at a Bedouin camp, just in time for what counts as before dinner in the desert. No tables, no plates, no golden cups, just the earth, a few stones, and a patient fire. The men sit cross-legged around the flames, their robes catching the last of the twilight. You can hear laughter, the gentle rustle of wind through the tents, and the faint hum of a prayer. The Bedouins have lived like this for centuries, moving from oasis to oasis, from night to night, surviving where most people wouldn't last a day. And before they eat, there's always a ritual of calm, a moment to breathe between hardship and hunger. Their pre-dinner snack is simple but symbolic, a handful of roasted locusts,
tossed on a metal pan until their wings crisp up like paper. You can almost smell the nutty aroma as they crackle in the heat. It's not the sort of thing you'd imagine craving, but in the desert, protein is survival. You watch one man pop a locust into his mouth, chew slowly, and nod with satisfaction. He offers you one with a smile, and out of politeness and a strange curiosity, you take it. The taste is earthy, smoky, and surprisingly rich. But that's not the only delicacy here. Someone brings a skin bag filled with cool, frothy liquid, camel milk. Thick, tangy, and slightly salty, it's more than a drink. It's medicine, hydration, and comfort rolled into one. Bedouins say camel milk cools the body and soothes the heart after a long day in the sun. Scholars still argue whether it's the most nutritious milk in the world, but for the nomads, it's simply life itself. You take a sip. It's strange at first, then oddly refreshing, like the desert's own version of iced tea. As the night deepens, the campfire grows brighter, painting the faces of the travelers in flickering gold. Someone begins to prepare kahwa, Arabic coffee, grinding roasted beans with cardamom pods in a brass mortar. The scent drifts through the camp, mixing with the aroma of burning acacia wood. You can't help but close your eyes for a second. It's hypnotic. When they pour you a cup, it's bitter, sharp, and hot enough to jolt your senses. It's tradition to serve coffee before the meal, a symbol of hospitality, a way of saying you are safe here. Hospitality, in fact, is sacred. A stranger who walks into a Bedouin tent at dusk is fed before being questioned. That's the rule of the sands, generosity before curiosity. You watch a host rise and offer dates to the circle, soft and sweet, glistening with natural syrup. Each man takes one, breaking the fast of the day before the main meal, usually lamb cooked in a pit beneath the sand or flatbread baked directly on the fire stones. But for now, it's about slowing down. Eating under the stars isn't just practical, it's spiritual. The desert sky is unlike anything else, a dome of diamonds so vast it feels like it's watching you back. You notice how the Bedouins pray before eating, facing Mecca, their voices soft and rhythmic, blending with the crackle of the flames. It's not loud or dramatic, just steady, the rhythm of people who've accepted how fragile life is out here. When they finally sit back down, they eat in silence, savoring every bite as if time itself has paused. One of the elders starts telling a story about a tribe that angered the wind by wasting food and how the desert swallowed them whole. The younger men laugh nervously, but no one wastes a crumb tonight. Even the ashes from the fire are treated with respect. You realize that here, food isn't just sustenance, it's gratitude in edible form. You think of how different this is from the royal feasts you saw before. No gold, no peacocks, no fear of poison, just sand, fire, and faith. Yet somehow this feels richer. Every flavor has purpose. Every bite carries a story. Even the locusts, strange as they seem, are tied to old survival tales. Bedouins once said that God gave the locust to the hungry as a gift, meat from the sky. You picture them chasing a swarm through the air, laughing as they catch dinner with bare hands. And then there's the firelight itself, the oldest kitchen in the world. You watch as the flames shift and dance, turning every shadow into a soft reminder of how small you are out here. The air cools quickly. The stars seem closer. A camel groans somewhere in the dark, the sound low and tired. Someone passes you another cup of coffee, and for a moment, you understand the rhythm of this world, the stillness before dinner, the quiet gratitude that binds strangers under one sky. As the night winds down, the men begin to hum an old tune. Not a song exactly, but something between chant and breath. You can't catch the words, but the meaning is clear. They've survived another day.
The dunes will shift, the fire will fade, but this ritual, this shared meal before the meal, will never die. You lie back in the sand, the fire crackling beside you, the milk's warmth still on your tongue. Above you, the stars burn brighter than any chandelier. And for the first time, the desert feels alive. You close your eyes, half expecting to wake up somewhere else, but no, this is real. This is what before dinner means when the world itself is your kitchen. You're kneeling on smooth tatami mats, your knees folded neatly beneath you, the scent of roasted tea leaves drifting softly through the air. A paper lantern glows in the corner, casting golden shadows across a bamboo wall. Outside, you can hear rain tapping gently on the wooden veranda, rhythmic, meditative, like the heartbeat of the house. You've stepped into a different kind of hunger now, one that has little to do with food and everything to do with presence. In front of you sits a monk, his head shaved, his movements precise and slow. Beside him, a samurai in muted armor kneels quietly, sword resting against the wall, eyes half closed in calm anticipation. Neither speaks. You realize you've entered the realm of the chanoyu, the Japanese tea ceremony. But here's the twist. This is the pre-dinner ritual, the transition between the outer world's noise and the inner world's stillness. The Japanese never treated tea as a drink. They treated it as a doorway. A small bowl is placed in front of you. Not food, not yet, just a tiny salted plum called umeboshi. Wrinkled, pinkish, and sharp with sourness, it's meant to cleanse the palate and the spirit before the tea arrives. You pick it up delicately, feeling its sticky skin between your fingers. When you bite into it, the flavor is electric. Sour, salty, almost shocking. You can't help but wince, and the monk notices. His lips twitch, amused. Before sweetness, he says softly, there must be contrast. Scholars still argue whether the tea ceremony began as a meditative act or a display of cultural discipline, but sitting here, you feel it's both. Every motion matters. The way the tea master lifts the bamboo ladle, the sound of water pouring into the iron pot, the whisking of matcha powder until it froths like green silk. The rhythm hypnotizes you. You're not watching someone make tea, you're watching centuries of philosophy unfold in slow motion. For samurai, this moment was sacred. Before battle or before a banquet, they practiced chano-yu to steady the hand and sharpen the mind. Imagine a warrior, armor gleaming, bowing to sip bitter tea before heading into a fight, not out of politeness, but as preparation. The bitterness reminded them of impermanence, the fleeting nature of life, of flavor, of existence itself. You sip your own bowl now. It's earthy, grassy, and faintly bitter, but somehow grounding. Nearby, the kitchen hums softly with preparation, though no noise dares to break the silence of the tea room. You catch a faint whiff of grilled fish, miso, and steaming rice, but the host makes no move toward dinner yet. Instead, he offers another pre-dinner bite, a sliver of konbu, seaweed, soaked in vinegar. Again, it's not about pleasure, it's about awakening the senses, cleansing them. You begin to notice how your awareness sharpens with every taste, how your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the tea whisk. This isn't just a meal, it's choreography. Even the smallest gestures carry meaning. The rotation of the tea bowl before drinking, the bow of gratitude after finishing, the silent acknowledgement of nature's role in the ritual. Every action humbles you. The samurai to your right drinks slowly, the monk beside him closes his eyes in meditation, and you sit between them, the outsider learning the language of stillness. Outside, the rain grows heavier. The sound merges with the bubbling of the iron kettle, creating a sort of accidental music. You realize there's no hunger here in the usual sense. The pre-dinner tea isn't meant to fill the stomach, it's meant to empty the mind.
You glance around and see a calligraphy scroll hanging on the wall. One word, painted in ink. Wa, meaning harmony. You feel it echo inside you. The salted plum lingers on your tongue even now, long after it's gone. That was the point. It wakes you up. It draws your attention to the present moment, just as the bitterness of tea grounds you in awareness. In a culture where even eating can be art, this quiet pause before the meal is almost sacred, a threshold between survival and serenity. Historical records from Japan's Muromachi period describe these early tea gatherings not as social events, but as acts of purification. Before the rice bowls and grilled eel came out, the guests shared tea to honor simplicity. One passage even mentions that the finest hosts served the poorest food, a reminder that true refinement lies in restraint. You think about that as you look at the empty dishes, just a plum pit and a faint ring of green tea at the bottom of your bowl. Somehow, it feels complete. There's a subtle irony in all this. You've seen Viking warriors gnawing on meat before raids, Bedouins roasting locusts beneath the stars, and kings feasting on gilded swans. Yet here, the preparation for dinner involves stillness, quiet, and something as humble as a salted fruit. You feel almost embarrassed by how peaceful it is. You want to laugh at yourself for expecting spectacle, but the monk's faint smile tells you he understands. Food comes and goes, he murmurs, but awareness stays. When the host finally bows, signaling the end of the tea, the samurai rises, gracefully. His armor clinks softly, a reminder of the world waiting outside. The monk gathers his robe. You do the same, bowing low before stepping out into the rain-soaked garden. The air is cold, but clean, washed by tea, silence, and the smell of wet earth. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a temple bell tolling, marking the transition to dinner. And as you walk under the curved eaves, you realize this was never just a prelude. The ceremony was the meal. Everything after this will simply be the echo of this quiet perfection.
The air around you hums with drums and dust. The sun glows like molten bronze over an endless savanna, and in the distance, you can see the outlines of mud brick palaces rising above bustling markets. You've arrived in ancient Mali, centuries ago, the heartbeat of trade, gold, and hidden delicacies that few outsiders ever got to taste. But you're not here for gold. You're here for what people ate before dinner, the small bites that powered kingdoms long before the world knew their names. You step into a courtyard shaded by woven mats. Women sit in a circle, grinding millet on smooth stones. Children laugh as they chase goats between the huts. And over a small clay stove, someone stirs a thick, dark paste in a pot. Smoky, nutty, and faintly sweet. Termite butter, a woman tells you with a grin. You blink. She's not joking. In the humid months, when the ground teems with winged termites, villagers would gather them by the basketful. Fried, roasted, or mashed into paste, they became a vital pre-meal snack, packed with fat and protein. You watch her spread a small dab of the paste on a flatbread, offering it to you. The flavor is deep and earthy, like roasted peanuts with a hint of smoke. It's oddly satisfying, and you can see why this secret ingredient fueled travelers and traders crossing thousands of miles of desert. Across Africa's ancient kingdoms, these so-called hidden proteins weren't oddities. They were art forms. In Nubia, the Black Land, along the Nile's southern stretch, people prepared roasted crickets before meals, tossing them with crushed dates and salt. The result was a perfect balance, crunchy, sweet, and savory. You can almost hear the crackle as they roast over the coals. There's no disgust here, no hesitation, only respect for nature's abundance. A young boy runs by carrying a clay bowl filled with river snails, their shells gleaming like polished jewels. "Tonight's feast," he announces proudly. The snails are simmered in herbs and palm oil until tender, their briny flavor echoing the nearby river. You take one, hesitant at first, but the taste surprises you. Buttery with a hint of spice. In a place where meat was precious, these delicacies filled the gap, turning what others ignored into nourishment. Scholars still argue whether the early kingdoms of Mali and Nubia had culinary rituals that mirrored Europe's or Asia's, but one thing is certain: food was never wasted, and before dinner was as meaningful as the feast itself. It was the time to taste the day's effort, to honor the small gifts that made survival possible. Even kings were known to share these humble snacks during evening gatherings, proving that status and simplicity could coexist under the same sun. As you wander through the market square of Timbuktu, spices filled the air: cardamom, sesame, and a sharp tang of fermented fish. You watch traders exchange not just gold and salt, but recipes. One merchant offers a small pouch of ground locust flour, high-protein powder used to bake early power cakes before long journeys. You can't help but smile. The world's first energy bars might have started here, beneath the Sahel sky. A griot, an old storyteller, begins to play his kora, a harp of calabash and string. His voice rises over the crowd, telling tales of warriors who crossed the desert sustained only by milk, honey, and roasted beetles. The people around him nod knowingly. You realize that in these stories, food isn't just nourishment, it's a source of pride, proof of resilience. You sip a cup of tamarind drink offered to you, sour and cool, and it feels like the desert itself has exhaled. Nearby, a noblewoman dressed in flowing indigo garments invites you to sit. Her attendants bring out bowls of baobab fruit pulp mixed with ground insects, a tangy, creamy paste served before dinner as both appetizer and medicine. The baobab, she explains, cools the body. The insects, she adds with a knowing smile, strengthen the spirit. She gestures toward the horizon. You can cross 1,000 dunes on that, she says proudly. You believe her. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of smoked fish and sweet yams. The sun has dropped lower now, painting everything in honey-colored light. This is the hour before the feast, the sacred moment of gathering. Families sit close, passing around small bowls and sharing laughter. Children nibble on roasted grasshoppers like popcorn, while elders sip fermented millet beer, murmuring prayers to ancestors. You realize you're witnessing something ancient, the pulse of community that beats just before nightfall when the day's hunger turns into gratitude. In one corner, an elder tells a curious tale of a time when a famine struck and the people prayed for salvation. The story goes that swarms of termites rose from the ground like dust, covering the land. Instead of cursing it, the villagers cooked them. From then on, termite season was called the season of mercy. The lesson is simple. The world provides if you're humble enough to see its gifts. As the first stars appear, you sit back and watch the firelight dance across the village. The sounds of drums echo in the distance. Someone passes you another roasted cricket, and this time you don't hesitate. You take a bite and feel the warmth of the fire, the rhythm of ancient voices, the unbroken link between hunger and gratitude. You think back to the royal halls, the monasteries, the tea rooms, and realize this might be your favorite stop yet. No luxury, no ceremony, just resourcefulness, flavor, and the quiet joy of surviving another day. The African kingdoms knew something the others often forgot, that the smallest foods, shared at the right moment, can carry the greatest meaning. The drums grow softer, the air smells of dust and tamarind. Someone laughs. Somewhere a child begins to sing. And for a moment, as you taste the last bite of termite butter, you understand dinner isn't just what you eat. It's the story that leads you there.
You wander through a gray mist that smells faintly of rain, smoke, and something earthy, like wet grass mixed with butter. The cobblestone road beneath your feet glistens with dew, and faint church bells echo in the distance. You've arrived somewhere between centuries-old Europe, but not the kind sung about in ballads or painted in cathedrals. This is the Europe of forgotten villages, damp cottages, and recipes that make you pause mid-step.
Your stomach rumbles as you approach a flickering window. Inside, an old woman in a shawl is stirring something thick in a copper pot. The smell is strangely inviting, savory with a hint of decay. She glances up, her eyes amused. "Supper's not ready," she says, "but the pie is nearly done." You ask what kind, expecting rabbit or onion. She answers with a grin. "Frog liver." You blink. She isn't joking. In forgotten corners of France and the Low Countries, before dinner even began, villagers served what they called tarte de grenouille, tiny amphibian livers sautéed in butter and shallots, mashed with herbs and baked into small pastry shells. It sounds absurdly delicate for peasant food, but frogs were everywhere, and waste was not an option. You imagine someone centuries ago crouching by a marsh, gathering a basket full of slippery frogs before dusk, a humble harvest, transformed into comfort. You sit as she slides one pie from the oven. The crust flakes apart at your touch. The taste, rich, meaty, faintly fishy, is oddly comforting. Maybe hunger always adjusts its standards. Elsewhere in this old continent, dinner began with things even stranger. In Scotland, villagers once boiled thistles in milk and butter, believing it softened the temperament. Buttered thistles. You can picture a farmer's wife plucking the spiny greens, muttering at their stubbornness while boiling them into submission. When you taste one now, imagined but vivid, it's bitter and creamy, the flavor of defiance disguised as soup. Scholars still argue whether dishes like these were acts of poverty or pride. Were people simply desperate, or were they showing nature that nothing would go to waste? You decide it's both. There's dignity in making a meal out of the unthinkable. You walk farther, crossing into the damp fields of Bohemia, where another odd ritual awaits. Before dinner, families would snack on roasted earthworms, dusted with flour and salt, not as punishment, but as medicine. The worms, they claimed, cleared the blood and warmed the stomach. You stare at a farmer roasting them over a candle. The smell's surprisingly nutty. He pops one into his mouth and offers you another. You hesitate. He laughs. "It's only dirt and muscle," he says. And he's right. You chew. It's chewy, grainy, oddly grounding. In northern Germany, things weren't much tamer. Their early evening bites included Buttermilk mit Zwiebelhaut, buttermilk infused with onion skins. People believed it cured fatigue and prepared the spirit for supper. You imagine them sipping it by firelight, grimacing, then nodding with satisfaction as if enduring it was part of the point. And in coastal England, before fish became the main meal, there were pickled gull eggs and toasted seaweed wafers, salty, briny morsels eaten with cider. You can almost feel the sting of cold wind as fishermen's wives served them, faces red from sea spray. There's something beautiful in their resilience, how necessity turned into tradition, and tradition into nostalgia. You pause near a small chapel, where a monk in brown robes offers you a wooden bowl. Inside, angel pudding. Not the sweet kind you'd expect, but a mixture of crushed herbs, nettles, and wild garlic mashed with bread. "To cleanse the tongue," he says. You take a bite. It's grassy, bitter, and rough. He smiles knowingly. "You taste the earth before you taste the heavens," he murmurs. You think about that as the flavors linger. By now, the air has cooled. A fog rolls across the fields, and you see the faint orange glow of another hearth. Inside, a family gathers for their early meal. The children nibble on what looks like roasted chestnuts, but the mother corrects you. Snails. The chestnuts are for guests. You laugh, then realize she's serious. In many forgotten corners of Europe, snails were pre-dinner food for peasants and monks alike, cheap, plentiful, and strangely satisfying when sautéed with butter and garlic. You take one, and the buttery chewiness feels almost decadent. Europe's forgotten foods weren't meant to impress. They were meant to prepare. Eating something strange before dinner wasn't punishment. It was ritual. The body had to be reminded of its fragility before the comfort of the meal began. You picture centuries of villagers sitting by small fires, eating frog liver or boiled thistle, and finding joy in the act of survival. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls 6 times. The village begins to quiet. Smoke drifts from chimneys like ribbons. You realize that in this twilight world, before dinner wasn't just a time, it was an attitude, a pause to acknowledge hunger before gratitude. You step out of the cottage. The air smells of wet hay and roasted garlic. A cat darts past your legs, chasing something unseen. You look back once more at the old woman inside, humming softly as she wipes her hands on her apron. She doesn't need a feast to feel full. She just needs warmth and something to stir. The mist thickens as you walk away. Your shoes are slick with dew, your stomach oddly content. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you imagine that frog liver pie again, the flavor of the forgotten, the taste of endurance. And for a brief moment, you understand that history's strangest meals weren't born from madness, but from genius, the kind that turns scarcity into memory and hunger into art.
The room flickers between centuries as you step back into the present. The air smells familiar now, not of wood smoke or frog liver, but of coffee, soy sauce, and the faint sweetness of something baking. Your kitchen hums with quiet machinery, the low sigh of the refrigerator, the rhythmic click of the gas stove. Yet beneath all that modern comfort, you can still feel the pulse of the ancient world. You open your pantry. Glass jars line the shelves, fermented pickles, chili paste, dried fish sauce. You might think of them as ordinary condiments, but they are whispers from the past. The Romans once crushed anchovies, salt, and sunlight into garum, their prized fermented fish sauce. You pour a little soy sauce into a bowl, and for a moment, the scent feels Roman, salty, pungent, alive. You realize you've inherited more than flavor. You've inherited a survival instinct masked as seasoning. Next to it sits a bag of potato chips. You smile, wondering if the first Mesopotamian baker, kneading salted barley dough 5,000 years ago, would recognize the pleasure of something crisp and salty before a meal. Salt has always been the first taste of anticipation, the signal that something better is coming. You crunch into the chip and hear, faintly, the crackle of ancient fires. You reach for the cheese next, a wedge of brie, soft and mild. But in its DNA is the legacy of nomads who discovered fermentation by accident. Milk left under a camel's saddle, turned by the heat into something sour and edible. You picture those desert wanderers under starlight, sipping camel milk before their prayers, and realize that even now we begin our dinners with something fermented, something living. Your hand drifts toward the spice rack. Cumin, turmeric, cardamom, fragments of India's Vedic kitchens. Their scents rise like ghosts from copper pots and sacred fires. Once, these were not just ingredients, but offerings to gods before humans could dine. You sprinkle turmeric into a pan of oil, and the golden sizzle sounds almost like a chant. The hunger that moves through you is not just physical, it's ceremonial. Then comes your ritual. You taste something before the main course, not out of need, but habit. A sip of soup, a spoonful of sauce, a small bite of bread dipped in oil. It's the same instinct that guided the Greeks to drizzle olives before dining, the Aztecs to chew cacao nibs in reverence, the Bedouins to sip milk as the sun went down. Every small pre-meal act carries the memory of people who feared the dark and thanked their food for light. You sit at the table, phone glowing beside your plate, and notice how modern eating still feels ancient. The urge to gather, to bless, to taste before feasting, it's timeless. When you scroll through recipes online, you're not just looking for flavor, you're chasing connection to ancestors who once mixed earth and salt and called it life. Your evening snack, a handful of roasted peanuts, might as well be Viking food. The crunch, the salt, the shared bowl. Somewhere in your DNA, a Viking warrior grins in approval. And your morning yogurt? A trace of Chinese emperors and their forbidden starters, fermented milk meant only for the palace. You pour yourself a drink. Tea, warm and silent. The steam curls upward like a spirit. You remember the monks of Japan, bowing before their salted plums, believing restraint was its own nourishment. You take a sip and hold it in your mouth. It tastes like calm. For all our progress, dinner still begins with remembrance. We may no longer kneel before hearths or temples, but our rituals persist. In the way we say, just one bite, or raise a toast, or sneak a taste while cooking. Hunger, after all, is the oldest religion. You look around your kitchen, the stainless steel, the digital timer, the glow of convenience, and yet every action still echoes something primal. The cutting, the stirring, the waiting. You are not just feeding yourself. You are continuing an unbroken conversation with time. Outside, the sky deepens to dusk, the same color it's been for thousands of years. The same light that once shimmered on Roman amphoras and Viking mead horns now reflects off your window pane. You take another small bite before dinner and realize it's not indulgence, it's inheritance. The first humans learned to eat not just to live, but to remember. Each taste before a meal was a thank you to the earth, a bridge between hunger and gratitude. And even now, in your modern kitchen, that bridge remains. The smells, the textures, the flavors, they are time capsules. A spoonful of soup can carry the silence of a monastery. A sip of wine can echo an ancient toast. You eat, you savor, and you become part of the endless rhythm of those who once gathered around firelight, waiting for supper. And as you finally lift your fork, you understand. The hunger that begins before dinner is not something to satisfy. It's something to honor. It's the echo of every ancestor who ever waited, who ever tasted, who ever whispered, "This is good enough to begin." You lean back now, full not from food, but from time itself. The world outside your window is quieted. Somewhere, a night insect hums against the glass, its rhythm steady as your own breathing. The stories of ancient feasts, the strange snacks, the rituals before dinner, they all blur together now, like flavors in a slow-cooked stew of memory. You think of the Egyptians raising cups of sour beer, of Romans crunching dormice by candlelight, or monks sipping silent tea before dusk. Each scene feels distant yet familiar, like déjà vu from another life. The truth is, you've always carried them with you, their curiosity, their reverence, their hunger. The way you taste, the way you wait, the way you say just one bite before the meal, all tiny echoes of humanity learning to love the moment before satisfaction. The lights dim a little more. You hear your own heartbeat, soft and slow. The hum of the fridge, the whisper of the fan, they become a lullaby now, gentle and ancient. You imagine yourself among those who came before, sharing warmth, sharing silence, sharing a small piece of something that once lived. Your eyelids feel heavier with every breath. The journey through time has left a pleasant quiet in your mind, like a table finally cleared after a long, joyful dinner. So, wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for joining tonight's wander through history's strangest cravings. You've walked beside emperors, peasants, and dreamers, all of them reaching for the same thing, a little comfort before the dark. Now, Let the stories fade like embers. Let the hunger rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.